Hello, folks. I am Alan for today's news. I will be reading and speaking about world news, interesting news, news to keep you entertained, and news to keep you informed. First thing I got for you here from Alcazar. Suspect in cafe attack that killed Russian blogger is jailed.
Russian authorities described bombing as an act of terrorism and blamed Ukrainian intelligence agencies for orchestrating it. The Ministry of Internal Affairs released a video in which Trepova told a police officer that she brought the bust to the café, Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs /handout via Reuters. A woman suspected of involvement in a bombing that killed a Russian military blogger at a St. Petersburg cafe should stay in custody for 2 months pending an investigation, a court in Moscow has ruled. The blogger, Vladlen Tatarsky, 40, was an ardent supporter of the war in Ukraine and filed regular reports on the fighting from the front lines. Keep reading. Prominent Russian military blogger killed in cafe blast. Who was fighter-turned-blogger Tatarsky and why was he killed? He was killed on Sunday as he led a discussion at a riverside cafe in the historic heart of St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city. Russian authorities described the bombing as an act of terrorism and blamed Ukrainian intelligence agencies for orchestrating it. Police arrested 26-year-old St. Petersburg resident Daria Trepova, who was seen on video moments before the blast presenting Tatarsky with a statuette that is believed to have contained explosives. Russia's health ministry said 42 others had been injured in the blast, and 24 were still in hospital as of late Tuesday. The Ministry of Internal Affairs released a video in which Trepova told a police officer that she brought the bust to the cafe. When asked who gave it to her, she said she would explain later.
This is 26-year-old Daria Trepova being questioned by Russian authorities in St. Petersburg. I brought a statue there that blew up, she says. Who gave you the statue, they ask. Can I tell you later, she replies. The bust was handed to prominent military blogger Vladlen Tatarsky. It exploded, killing him and injuring dozens of people on Sunday evening. Trepova has yet to provide a name and says she's been framed. The attack happened at a cafe in the heart of St. Petersburg. The National Anti-Terror Committee, which is part of the Russian security service, says it was planned by the Ukrainian Special Services, a charge authorities in Kiev have denied.
We expect that now Russia also will know the response. But everyone would ask, how many people will be killed by Kiev regime here in Moscow before Russia will respond? Nobody knows exactly. But probably more time coming, more strong will be a response.
Tatarsky was speaking at an event organized by the Cyberfront Z movement, an association of people with patriotic views. He was a supporter of Russia's invasion, and the social media channel he launched to report on the so-called special military operation had more than 500,000 subscribers. Tatarsky was a well-known figure among Kremlin supporters. Seen here with Daria Dugina, who was killed in a car bomb attack in the Moscow region in August. Her father, Alexander Dugin, a far-right political philosopher, was believed to be the intended target.
The Kremlin says Tatarsky's killing is an act of terror and that evidence implicates Ukrainian special services without providing any further details. While these types of attacks are rare in Russia, the planning and plotting behind them suggests that the battles are no longer confined to the Donbass region. Dorsa Jabari, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
And you can read the rest of this in my description box if you like to know more about it. Now we're going to go to the next one here. This from Ukrainska Pravda. Romanian F-16s intercept 2 Russian jet fighters while on duty in Baltic States.
Romanian fighter jets that are based in the Baltic States within NATO air patrol mission took off to intercept 2 Russian Su-27 fighters. Source: Romanian Air Force. On April 7, 6 days into their duty as part of the enhanced air patrol mission in the Baltics, the pilots received a notification from the NATO Air Operations Center in Weidum, Germany, about unidentified aircraft over international waters in the NATO area of responsibility. After the interception, the fighters were identified as Russian Su-27s. Romanian pilots accompanied them to the exit from the area of responsibility of the alliance. During just 1 week at the end of March, fighter jets of the NATO mission in the Baltics took off 6 times to escort Russian planes that violated the rules of flight in the international airspace over the Baltic Sea.
Okay, that's all on that one there. The links will still be in my description box if you want to go back over it again. Now to the next one from El Paris, USA. U.S. deploys guided missile submarine amid tensions in Iran.
The U.S. Navy has deployed a guided missile submarine capable of carrying up to 154 Tomahawk missiles to the Middle East, a spokesman said Saturday, in what appeared to be a show of force toward Iran following recent tensions. The Navy rarely acknowledges the location or deployment of submarines. Commander Timothy Hawkins, a spokesman for the Fifth Fleet based in the Gulf nation of Bahrain, declined to comment on the submarine's mission or what had prompted the deployment. He said the nuclear-powered submarine, based out of Kings Bay, Georgia, passed through the Suez Canal on Friday. It is capable of carrying up to 154 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles and is deployed to U.S. Fifth Fleet to help ensure regional maritime security and stability, Hawkins said. The Fifth Fleet patrols the crucial Strait of Hormuz, the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf through which 20% of all oil transits. Its region includes the Bab el-Mandeb Strait off Yemen and the Red Sea stretching up to the Suez Canal, the Egyptian waterway linking the Mideast to the Mediterranean Sea. The US, the UK and Israel have accused Iran of targeting oil tankers and commercial ships in recent years, allegations denied by Tehran. The U.S. Navy has also reported a series of tense encounters at sea with Iranian forces that it said were being recklessly aggressive. Last month, the U.S. launched airstrikes against Iran-backed forces in Syria after a rocket attack killed a U.S. contractor and wounded 7 other Americans in that country's northeast. Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from ships or submarines can hit targets up to 2,500 kilometers, 1,500 miles away. They were famously employed during the opening hours of the 2003 U.S.-led invasion of Iraq and in response to a Syrian chemical weapons attack in 2018. U.S.-Iranian tensions have soared since then-President Donald Trump withdrew from a 2015 agreement with world powers that provided sanctions relief in return for Iran curbing its nuclear activities and placing them under enhanced surveillance. The Biden administration's efforts to restore the agreement hit a wall last year. The tensions have worsened as Iran has supplied attack drones to Russian forces in Ukraine and as Israel and Iran have escalated their years-long shadow war in the Middle East. In addition to drawing closer to Moscow, Tehran has sought improved relations with China, which brokered an agreement last month to restore diplomatic ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
And that's all on that one there. If you want to read them, if you want to read back over it and watch any of these videos, be in my description box. Let's go on to the next one here. Russia Defense Ministry. Oh, that's from Ukrainska Pravda. Russian Defense Ministry announces preparation of chemical attack.
The Russian Defense Ministry has announced the trial of a chemical attack, planning to accuse the armed forces of Ukraine of this attack. Source: Russian Defense Ministry. Details: the Russian authority writes that Ukraine allegedly plans to deliver the bodies and remains of dead servicemen equipped with toxic substances to Sumy Oblast. Then, allegedly, Ukraine will invite experts from Western countries and post intercepted phone calls with Russians talking about a chemical attack. Why this is important: Russia has repeatedly used this tactic. It foresaw terrorist attacks or attacks and then carried them out by itself. Last year, the UK feared that the Russian Federation might fabricate a pretext for using chemical weapons in the war with Ukraine, as the plan to occupy the country and capture Kiev in a few days ultimately failed. Note: Russian occupiers used against the armed forces banned chemical weapons, namely the K-51 aerosol grenades.
And that's all on that one there. Looks like I'll still put the link in the description box. Okay, the next one I got here is from USA Today. One thing uniting Americans, regardless of party, they hate Washington poll.
Most Americans are largely dissatisfied with, well, everyone in Washington. The majority of Americans have negative views of President Joe Biden and both Republican and Democratic leadership in Congress, according to a survey released Friday by the Pew Research Center. That pessimism extends beyond political leaders as well. Most Americans have little confidence in the country's ability to solve major problems and also do not trust the American public in making political decisions. Start the day smarter. Get all the news you need. What do Americans think of Joe Biden? Congress? 60% of Americans disapprove of Biden's job performance, compared to 37% of Americans who do approve of Biden. In Congress, 65% of Americans disapprove of Democratic leadership's job performance, compared to only 33% who do approve. Congressional Republicans are also viewed negatively, with GOP leadership having a 68% disapproval rating compared to a 29% approval rating. Stay in the conversation on politics. What do Americans think of Congress overall? The Supreme Court? The survey's respondents don't have favorable views of other institutions as well. Overall, only 26% of Americans have a favorable opinion of the new Congress, after Republicans took control of the House majority in January. Few Democrats and Republicans have favorable views of the new Congress. 28% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents and 26% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents have a favorable view. The Supreme Court's favorability continues to be low, with 50% of Americans viewing the court unfavorably compared to 48% of Americans who view the court favorably. Related, following furor over GOP. The American public has little confidence in the American public. There was little room for positivity in the poll's findings. Beyond Washington, Americans generally have a negative view of their fellow Americans and also the country's ability to address important problems. 76% of respondents said they have either little or no confidence in the American public's ability to make political decisions, compared to 62% in 2021. A majority of Americans do not think the country is capable of solving its important problems, with 56% of Americans doubtful, compared to 41% in 2022. The poll has a margin of error of plus or minus 1.7%.
Okay, that's on that article there. I never had trust in Congress, the Supreme Court, or any courts. I do not have. I do not trust the jurors or any kind of jurors, because I've been on one before. Not Supreme Court juror, but anyway. The link will be in my description box. And by the way, too, I should have a YouTube podcast out too with my news on it also. Let's go to the next one here. This from Al Jazeera. Russia charges WSJ reporter Evan Gershkovich with spying reports. See what it says here.
Russian media say the journalist denied the espionage charge and said he was engaged in journalistic activities. Evan Gershkovich, file, The Wall Street Journal/handout via Reuters. Russia has formally charged detained Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich with espionage, according to Russian news agencies. State-run TASS news agency reported on Friday that the United States journalist denied the charge. Russia's Federal Security Service, FSB, the main successor to the Soviet-era KGB, said on March 30 that it had detained Gershkovich in the Ural city of Ekaterinburg and opened an espionage case against the 31-year-old for collecting what it said were state secrets about the military-industrial complex. FSB investigators charged Gershkovich with espionage in the interests of his country, TASS said, citing a law enforcement source. He categorically denied all accusations and stated that he was engaged in journalistic activities in Russia, it added. Another Russian news agency, Interfax, also reported the development, citing an unidentified source. The Wall Street Journal has denied that Gershkovich was spying and demanded the immediate release of its trusted and dedicated reporter. The U.S. has urged Russia to release Gershkovich and cast the Russian claims of espionage as ridiculous. The White House said on Thursday that Russia's refusal to give consular access to Gershkovich was inexcusable. We need to get consular access to Evan, National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby told reporters. Sign up for Al Jazeera. Pointless pressure. Russia's foreign ministry said on the same day that it was pointless to try to pressure Moscow over its case against Gershkovich. Hype around this case, which is being fanned in the United States, with the aim of pressuring Russian authorities and the court, is pointless and meaningless, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov told U.S. Ambassador Lynn Tracy, according to a statement. He was caught red-handed while trying to obtain secret information, using his journalistic status as a cover for illegal actions, qualifying as espionage, the statement added. Ekaterinburg, where Gershkovich was detained, is some 1,800 kilometers, 1,100 miles east of Moscow. He was then transferred to the capital and placed in detention until May 29 pending trial. The journalist's arrest has drawn outrage from the West and is seen as a serious escalation of Moscow's crackdown on media.
And that's all that there is on that one there. Let me go to the next one here. This is from Al Jazeera's too. Republicans furious at Biden's Afghanistan review. Democrats mum.
A review released by the White House largely blamed former President Trump for chaotic U.S. pullout from Afghanistan. Afghan passengers board an Air Force plane in Kabul as the U.S. withdraws from Afghanistan in August 2021. The file, MSGT Donald R. Allen, U.S. Air Force/AP. By Al Jazeera staff. Washington, D.C., Republicans have expressed outrage after the administration of President Joe Biden largely blamed his predecessor Donald Trump for the shortcomings of the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan. A summary report released by the White House on Thursday justified how the current administration carried out the chaotic U.S. exit from Afghanistan in 2021. It said Biden's choices for how to execute a withdrawal from Afghanistan were severely constrained by conditions created by Trump. That assessment sparked a rebuke from Republicans in Congress, who accused the Biden administration of absolving itself of responsibility by pointing the finger at the former president. Key Democrats in Congress have stayed mostly mum about the review. Congressman William Timmons called the report a partisan absurdity, invoking an ISIS attack on an evacuation operation in Kabul during the U.S. withdrawal that killed at least 175 people, including 13 American service members, in 2021. Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan directly resulted in the loss of 13 U.S. service members, the deaths of thousands of Afghans, and billions of dollars of U.S. military equipment left in the hands of the Taliban, Timmons, a South Carolina Republican, wrote on Twitter. Congressman Ben Cline. @ Rep. Ben Cline. Follow. Biden can deflect all he wants for the Afghanistan withdrawal, but under his watch, Americans were abandoned. 13 service members died. Military equipment was left for the Taliban. Real leaders take responsibility for their decisions. Biden refuses, and he should be ashamed.
Yeah, it's all Biden's fault. And there's more to read here if you want to read about it. I don't want to keep all my cast on one article. I'm going to go to the next one now. It's from Alcazar. U.S. Justice Clarence Thomas responds to unreported luxury travel.
The Supreme Court justice says he has sought to comply with rules after ProPublica revealed apparent law violation. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has replied to report showing he may have broken law in failing to disclose gifted trips. J. Scott Applewhite / The Associated Press. By Al Jazeera staff. United States Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has responded to a report detailing his failure to disclose luxury trips provided by a Republican mega-donor, a possible violation of the law. In a statement to U.S. media on Friday, Thomas said he had always sought to comply with the disclosure guidelines. His response came a day after a report from the non-profit news publication ProPublica, which detailed regular trips taken by the staunchly conservative justice on the private jet and 162-foot, 50-meter, yacht of real estate scion Harlan Crow. The report said that Thomas's failure to report 2 decades of travel in annual disclosures appeared to run afoul of a law that requires justices on the 9-member Supreme Court to disclose most gifts, including travel. In the statement, Thomas admitted that he and his wife Virginia, known as Ginny, had taken a number of family trips with the Crows, whom he called among our dearest friends. He said early in his tenure he had sought guidance from my colleagues and others in the judiciary, and was advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends, who did not have business before the court, was not reportable. He added that disclosure guidelines for the justices were regularly being updated, including last month. It is, of course, my intent to follow this guidance in the future, he said. Justin Elliott. @ Justin Elliott. Follow. New, Clarence Thomas secretly accepted lavish luxury travel for decades from a billionaire businessman / GOP donor, in apparent repeat violation of ethics law. FMR judge, it's incomprehensible to me that someone would do this. ProPublica.org.
Okay, that's there's more to read on that one there if you want to read more about it. I'm going to go to the next one now. This one here from 1945. Trump might not be in legal trouble after all.
Could Trump wiggle off the hook? The recent accusations against former President Donald Trump, in which he was indicted and arraigned for 34 felony counts for actions relating to hush money paid to an adult video star and a Playboy model, are relatively weak and may not stand up in court. While at first blush, the charges appear serious, they may not survive further judicial scrutiny, even though the accused feels the judge in the case is a Trump hater. Subscribe to 1945's new YouTube channel here. Donald Trump, statute of limitations could come into play. The first aspect of the case that stands out is the potential violation of the statute of limitations because the actions in question happened over 6 years ago. In New York, the statute of limitations is 5 years for a felony, although that can be extended in some cases because Trump did not live in New York continuously during that time. But his legal team is likely to file their first motion to dismiss based on the charges eclipsing the statute of limitations. Are the specifics? Another weakness is that the indictments are overly broad and general. One of Trump's attorneys, Joe Tacopina, told Fox News what really wasn't expected is that they were going to hand down an indictment without specifying what these alleged underlying crimes were. It's shocking to me that a state prosecutor would try and prosecute something as thin as this. Are these charges felonies? Plus, the indictment is not clear on one of the most important aspects of whether the charges should be felonies instead of misdemeanors. The law Trump allegedly broke is a misdemeanor based on falsifying business records, but it can be considered a felony if it is associated with another crime. The Wall Street Journal wrote an editorial skeptical of whether the second crime was committed. Where is the second crime? The Journal asked. The district attorney Alvin Bragg owes the public a better explanation of his theory of the case. His unclear and evasive reply Tuesday isn't helping his cause. Trump could also make the legal defense that he was trying to keep the extramarital affairs private so his wife would not find out and that he had no criminal intent to defraud or break any laws. Bragg, alternatively, wants to show that the misdemeanors were made to cover up a more serious crime. Bragg is trying to say that Trump falsified records and this led to him violating New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The problem with that accusation is that it is not in the indictment. This was a quote from Bragg after he made a statement after the arraignment. That means that Trump could potentially only be prosecuted for misdemeanors. Could Trump walk with only misdemeanor convictions? Vox writer Ian Millhiser pointed out that there is a serious risk that a New York judge will toss out the charges against Trump on technical legal grounds unrelated to the former president's actual conduct. Thus, since the indictment is unclear on the second crime, and if convicted based on this statute, Trump could appeal it to the Supreme Court. This case could then be drawn out for months, if not years. There is a possibility that Trump could win the White House before he goes to trial, or if convicted, he would not have to face criminal penalties until far into the future.
Okay, that's all on that one there. Link will still be in my description box, and I just can't wait until the next election when Biden's not a president no more, and then start convicting him and his son on criminal activities. Tell me what you think. Let's go to the next one. This is from Fox News. Biden hands environmentalists a major victory in fight against mining oil drilling.
The Biden administration is moving to lock up vast swaths of federal lands eligible for energy development in an effort to combat climate change and reduce carbon emissions. The Bureau of Land Management, BLM, which oversees 245 million acres of public lands and a subsurface mineral estate spanning 700 million acres, proposed a rule last week that would allow environmental organizations that are opposed to fossil fuel drilling and mining projects to lease land for conservation uses, thereby blocking resource development. The process announced today could fundamentally change the way BLM approaches land management, said Ethan Manuel, the director of Sierra Club's Lands Protection Program. As the largest manager of lands in the country, BLM must be a critical part of the U.S. strategy for taking on climate change and biodiversity loss. We hope that this process leads to a new BLM that puts the needs of the climate and species ahead of profits for the oil and gas industry, Manuel added.
And there's more to read on this if you want to read it. The link will be in my description box, like always. And let me go to the next one now. It's from Fox Weather. Dailiest volcano in Western Hemisphere shows sign of increased activity.
Bogota, Colombia. Experts say a volcano responsible for causing one of the largest disasters in the Western Hemisphere is showing signs of increased activity, which has forced the Colombian government to issue evacuations in the potential impact zone. The Nevado del Ruiz volcano sits about 80 miles west of Bogota, and according to Colombia's Geological Survey, an earthquake swarm has increased to levels not seen since a disastrous eruption in the 1980s killed at least 25,000 people. Authorities have raised the alert level to orange, the second highest on a 4-stage scale. A recent update posted by the Global Volcanism Program said on March 30 some 11,600 earthquakes were detected, and the movement of underground fluid was likely responsible for increased ash emissions. Hawaii's Mauna Loa, world's largest active volcano, erupts for first time since 1984. An estimated 57,000 people live in municipalities close to the volcano, and the population has only increased since the Armoro tragedy caught thousands off guard on November 13, 1985. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the last major eruption occurred during a time of major political discourse, and the nighttime event was obscured by a significant storm. Within minutes, 23,000 people, most of the town's inhabitants, were killed, entombed within a concrete-like mixture of mud, vegetation, buildings, and everything else swept away by the lahars. Sadly, the lahars reached Armoro approximately 2 hours after the eruption, plenty of time for the people to have evacuated to higher ground, had they been notified more quickly, the USGS recounted.
And let me see here. Oh, I might as well just go ahead and finish reading this. There's not much left there.
President Gustavo Petro has encouraged people in the potential impact zone to evacuate and has asked authorities to hasten their response. We have asked the departmental risk councils to speed up the preventive evacuation of 2,500 families that are at high risk due to the contingency of Nevado del Ruiz, Petro said in a statement. According to Colombian officials, there have been 18 orange alerts since 1985, with none leading to a major eruption. Volcanologists compare the Nevado del Ruiz to Washington's Mount St. Helens. Both volcanoes are capable of explosive eruptions and dangerous mudflows that swallow everything in their path.
And that's all of this on that one there. Link will be in my description box. We'll go back over it. Next one here we got. Now this, after I read this one here, I knew California was crazy, but now I really know California crazy. This from News Nation. California lawmaker proposes ebony alert system. Wait till you hear this one.
A bill aimed at creating a system similar to Amber Alerts, but specifically for missing Black young adults and adolescents, was introduced into the California Senate last month. Senate Bill 673, introduced by Senator Stephen Bradford, D. Gardena, would create the Ebony Alert system, which would have the California Highway Patrol take steps to assist local law enforcement agencies in finding missing people, such as issuing a Be on the Lookout alert, an electronic flyer, or changeable message signs. The Ebony Alert would ensure that resources and attention are given so we can bring home missing Black women and Black children in the same way we would search for any missing child and missing person, said Bradford. The bill lays out considerations for if an Ebony Alert should be issued, including if the missing person is between 12 to 25 years of age, if they suffer from a mental or physical disability, if their physical safety may be endangered, and other factors. According to the bill, Black children are disproportionately classified as runaways in comparison to their white counterparts, which means fewer resources are dedicated to finding them. When someone who is missing is incorrectly listed as a runaway, they basically vanish a second time, Bradford said. They vanish from the police detective's workload. They vanish from the headlines. In many ways, no one even knows they are missing. Last year, Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law the creation of the Feather Alert system specifically directed at finding Indigenous people reported missing.
Yeah, so before you know it, white people is going to be on the lower scale here. California don't care about white people anymore. They don't. Let's go to the next one here. Tell me what you think about this. Making ridiculous laws. This one here is from Motor Biscuit. U.S. Army steering problems, bent seats, engine cracks, overheating plague Chevrolet defense trucks.
Approval of the GM Defense Infantry Squad Vehicle, ISV, has been ongoing for a year over several issues that developed during tests. The Army labeled the ISV not operationally effective. It spelled out a range of developmental issues over reliability, safety, maintenance, and human system integration. The bottom line, the Army's rigorous testing was too much for GM's ISV. How do GM Defense and the Army test these ISVs? But this week, Army officials approved what it calls full-rate production, following the year-long successful testing after further development. Included in the testing procedures are qualification testing and also transportability certification. That last certification is because it must withstand low-velocity drops and helicopter sling loading. The GM ISVs must be able to handle transport by UH-60 and CH-47 helicopters, and also by C-130 and C-17 transporters. The basis for the ISV trucks is the Chevrolet Colorado ZR2. With a payload of 3,200 pounds, it must be able to handle various terrain conditions. Also, it must accommodate up to 9 soldiers and be able to withstand long-range assignments. GM Defense says that over 90% of the parts used on its ISV are off-the-shelf components. The Army says the weight for each one is 5,000 pounds. How many ISD trucks were tested? Since testing began, the Army has integrated more than 300 ISVs. Testing for 3 brigade sets took place during troop training. There are 59 ISVs in each brigade. Ultimately, the Army will take delivery of 2,593 ISVs. GM builds 20 ISVs each month, though it may increase production with this latest approval, according to Breaking Defense. Production will be spread out between now and 2028. The production of the initial 649 vehicles, including development, was by contracting for $214 million through 2024. There were no mission failures or system aborts from the last round of testing, a GM Defense spokesperson wrote in an email to Breaking Defense. What do these GM Defense ISDs do for the Army? Related. GM turns Colorado ZR2 into Defense Infantry Squad Vehicle. Developmental and operational testing enable units to train while offering feedback to the requirements and acquisition communities, the Army said in a statement. This is aimed at improving a system's utility and operational effectiveness in soldiers' hands, as well as suitability for the environments in which soldiers train and fight. During initial testing, the Army found the GM ISV could not meet the required 1,200 mean miles travel distance without failure. Further testing of more recently developed trucks required drives over 5,000 miles before they could pass. Part of this testing included fire support, command and control, electronic warfare, counter-unmanned aircraft systems, reconnaissance, logistics, and casualty evacuation missions. GM builds numerous military-specific vehicles based on various production commercial vehicles. Besides this gas-powered ISV, the Army is also testing an all-electric ISV. No details of the EV are available at this time. The post-U.S. Army, steering problems, bent seats, engine cracks, overheating plague Chevrolet defense trucks appeared first on Motor Biscuit.
Now, can you imagine that, having all electric vehicle over there? Are they going to put charging stations in all these countries so we can, in the deserts and stuff, so we can charge them up? And how long would it take to charge them up? There's a war going on at times, Ridiculous. Yeah. Let me know what you think. If they should put all electric ISVs over there. This thing looks pretty cool, though. No doors. I like that. Let's go on to the next one. This from the Associated Press. Russia loses election to 3 UN bodies over Ukraine.
United Nations, AP, Russia lost elections to 3 United Nations bodies this week, a sign that opposition to its invasion of Ukraine over a year ago remains strong. The votes in the 54-member UN Economic and Social Council follow approval of 6 non-binding resolutions against Russia by the 193-member UN General Assembly. The latest, on February 23, the eve of the first anniversary of the invasion, called for Moscow to end hostilities and withdraw its forces and was adopted by a vote of 141-7 with 32 abstentions. In the ECOSOC votes, Russia was overwhelmingly defeated by Romania for a seat on the Commission on the Status of Women. It lost to Estonia to be a member of the Executive Board of the UN Children's Agency UNICEF. And it was defeated by Armenia and the Czech Republic in secret ballot votes for membership on the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said after Wednesday's votes, "This is a clear signal from ECOSOC members that no country should hold positions on critical UN bodies when they are in flagrant violation of the UN Charter." In the voting for members of 14 commissions, boards and expert groups that ECOSOC oversees, Russia was elected to the Commission for Social Development by acclamation, which the United States and the United Kingdom dissociated their countries from, saying Russia's invasion violates international law and Ukraine's territorial integrity. Russia was also elected by acclamation to the Intergovernmental Working Group of Experts on International Standards of Accounting and Reporting.
And that's all I got on that one there. And I got one more for you in my newscast here. This one here is from Markets Insider. The bond market is warning that something is broken and that the Fed has done enough. Market veteran Ed Yardini says, see what it says here.
Inverted yield curves often indicate a coming credit crunch, the market veteran said. But while a broad lending shortage is unlikely, the Fed should not lift interest rates any further. The bond market also shows that investors are betting on moderating inflation rates. The bond market is flashing a warning that the financial system is damaged, Ed Yardini told Bloomberg TV, with bondholders continuing to bet on future turmoil. That should have implications for the Federal Reserve's next moves, he added, restricting further interest rate hikes. In the past, whenever the yield curve has turned negative, that was always a precursor to something blowing up in the financial system, the market veteran said. Leading to a credit crunch, an economy-wide credit crunch, where even good borrowers couldn't get money, and that in turn led to a recession. The curve becomes negative when the yield on a shorter-term bond surpasses that of a longer-term one, indicating that investors expect interest rates to fall in the future, often a sign of a coming recession. His is currently the case, with the 2-year Treasury holding a 3.82% yield, compared to a 3.31% yield on the 10-year Treasury. And earlier this year, the difference between the two notes fell to its widest in 4 decades. But while the bond inversion is showing a continued pullback from long-term investing, especially in the wake of March's banking turmoil, Yardini argues that the current situation is not enough to force a broad credit crunch. This may be due to lending facilities set up for banks after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, in an effort to reduce the possibility of a greater financial contagion, and that has allowed institutions to continue lending. Instead, the negative yield curve should be an indication for the Fed to halt any further interest rate hikes, he said. According to him, bond markets are indicating that the central bank's current rate of 5% is restrictive enough and that any further increases only risk worsening the situation and causing a hard landing. I think the bond market is also expressing confidence that inflation will be moderating, he added. I mean, nobody's gonna be buying bonds at 3.5% if they think that inflation is going to be coming down. Yardini is not alone in calming concerns around a credit shortage, as the Fed President James Bullard also characterized the situation as easing. However, in his view, interest rates should continue to climb in order to combat resilient inflation rates.
Okay, that's all I got on that one there. I said it once, I'll say it again. Raise the rates, people will be spending less. They'll be borrowing less money. It's going to hurt the economy. The feds can't get it through their stupid heads. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. And remember, my news should be on a YouTube podcast also, hopefully. I signed for it yesterday. And I hope you like what I had. I know there wasn't a whole lot of news that you expected. But anyway, I tried to get what I could. And don't forget to like, subscribe, at least come back once in a while. And until next time, thanks for watching. Later.